Howdy, and welcome back to You've Got People Problems, the podcast where we tackle the leadership challenges that no one wants to talk about, but every business faces. I'm your host, Melissa Ortiz with Activate Human Capital Group, and this is episode 26. Today I'm joined by someone who's worn a lot of hats in my world: a client, a vendor, a partner, a friend, and just a really incredible parent and leader, Jennifer Guidry. Jennifer is the founder and CEO of Solomon Advising, where she and her team serve as fractional CMOs and COOs for professional services firms and private mental health practices across the country. In this episode, we're digging into one of my favorite conversations: what happens when we try to force square pegs into round holes, and why building well-rounded teams is the real secret to sustainable growth. Jennifer brings a practical and thoughtful perspective, and I can't wait for you to hear this conversation. Howdy, y'all, and welcome to You've Got People Problems. I'm so excited today to have Jen Goodry with me, who is a client, a vendor partner, a friend, and just a really wonderful parent and human being. And we are talking about square pegs and round holes and developing well-rounded teams, because if we can do those things, we're better off as leaders, our clients are better off, and our profitability is better off, not to mention our team members being better off. So I thought you'd be such a great person to talk to us about this discussion, because we've really been on this path together for 2 years almost?
Yes.
And I think you're someone who's really integrated the concepts that we lay out together extremely well. So would you like to introduce yourself and the role of Solomon Advising?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. And I'm a little nervous. This is actually the first podcast I've ever done. And so I hope that I do okay. As you said, my name's Jennifer, and I'm the founder and CEO of Solomon Advising. We are a small consulting firm that supports primarily professional services firms, as well as a niche in private mental health practices throughout the country. And we operate primarily as a fractional CMO and COO. So kind of leading on the strategy of both marketing and operations. And then our team handles a lot of the deliverables in both of those spaces as well, depending on what the client or organization needs. And we've been doing that for almost 10 years now. It's been a lot of fun.
Time flies. Time flies. Well, if you're listening because you know Jen and you don't know me, my name is Mel Ortiz, and I'm obsessed with what makes people tick and how do we help them get in the right seats so they can contribute at the highest level, which means they go home with more energy for their family and their faith and their well-being, whatever's important to them, but also they're contributing at very high levels at work because they're engaged, because they're in a role that suits them well. And so I've got some great tools around employee engagement and Predictive Index. And Jen and I have been working together on Predictive Index for a while, and just really dialing in the elements of her team that can keep raising their abilities and their outputs to team members. So if you've ever received one of our Activate newsletters, her team is the one that really helps us put all that together. And it's been a godsend to know that's just going to go out like clockwork as long as they pull out of me the resources that they need. So Jen, if we think about the square peg round hole discussion, let's think about it like as an onion, right? From the inside out, let's talk about it at an individual level, because one of the things PI is really good at, from my perspective, over working with them for the last 8 years, is identifying what are the demands of a role and how do the candidates that are coming through the pipeline align with those demands, just by the way they show up in the world. What's been your experience in defining those aptitudes, evaluating candidates? Tell me a little bit about your experience with PI and getting round pegs for round holes.
Yeah, well, I think prior to using Predictive Index, I was guilty of really smashing square pegs into round holes over and over again. I think the biggest example of that is with my number two, who's been with me for more than 10 years. But I really didn't know all of what his natural aptitude or even drivers were. And so I just kept pushing him to be who he was, but also who I needed, which lots of times ended up being very stressful for him, overwhelming for him, challenging for him. And I'm so proud of what we've been able to accomplish together and how well we have persevered and his resilience and how much he's grown. But it was also clear that that road didn't have to be as hard as it was. And so when we introduced PI to our team, it was really exciting for the two of us to look at our individual profiles and see, oh, this is why you see the world this way, and this is why you've struggled for 10 years to do this, because ultimately the expectation that I've put on you is a huge stretch for who you are. And you're a very capable person, and you're so eager and so willing. And so you have chosen to continue to stretch in order to meet the demands that I have put on the role. But wow, like now we're not just a couple of people on the team, we're pushing, 10 employees and a bunch of subcontractors and so forth. And so how can we reshape our relationship about the way that we work and the role that you do so that it doesn't have to feel like such a stretch? And that was, I think, just a huge sigh of relief for the both of us to like celebrate who we were naturally and the way that we approach our work, but also to acknowledge and recognize where we have struggled and where the expectation of stretching was probably not always great or realistic or helpful. And so that was really the first big shift for us in, and for me in choosing to say, oh, I don't need you to keep rounding out your square corners to fit into this round hole. I'm just going to put you in the square hole that you already naturally fit in. And let's find some other people to fit into this type of, position or role. So that's maybe the first and biggest example I can say of how we've utilized PI as a team, and really started with leadership first. And I think it was so great to do it with someone that I have such a long-standing employment relationship with, to have someone that I've worked with for 10 years and that we have over time carved out and created some compatibility, but could still recognize struggles along the way, and kind of rewrite that narrative was also very healing, I think, and just really exciting about how we could rewrite the next 10 years with PI to enable us to do what we're better doing, if that makes sense.
It's amazing how it almost gives us a permission slip to be who we are more wholeheartedly, and less of this expectation that we be all things to all people. That we're very, we dot all our I's and cross all our T's, but also have a high degree of urgency. Well, those usually don't come in the same package, unfortunately. And so it's like, how do we place people? It's interesting. I'm working with a CEO right now, and we're talking about, he's got an operations leader who he's bringing up and has been working with for the last 4 years to get to the next level. And one of the considerations is this person's really great at putting out fires in the production side of the business. Can they go to where they're preventing the fires? And their natural aptitude is getting joy from the fact that the day changes around him. And, I've got some real questions whether that would be a good jump or not. And some of it's cognitive ability, which PI also helps us evaluate, but just setting people up. It's amazing how the square peg round hole, one of the biggest things I see, especially in our engagement work, when I put the two together, is it creates major imposter syndrome. When I know I'm not quite who you need me to be. So I work really hard to be who you need me to be, but I end up spending all my energy trying to be who you need me to be instead of just showing up to work with shoes on and being in the square peg in the round hole, in the square hole. So it's this permission slip to be like, oh, you're different than me, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
Instead of you're different than me, and that annoys the crap out of me.
Right. Or you're constantly disappointing me, right? Like you're constantly not meeting my expectations. And I think it's also been really great for like career pathing. A lot of employees really feel like, well, there's only one way to advance, and that's to get promoted and maybe move into higher degrees of responsibility or management. And a lot of people have this belief that that's what they should do, and that's the path they should go on. But a lot of times those different roles don't really suit who they are, or the fact that what they're doing is maybe perfectly suited to who they are, and them excelling in that and doing really well does need to be rewarded, but it doesn't necessarily have to be rewarded with, oh, let's now put you into this other position that has an entirely different set of expectations and skill sets. And so it's been wonderful to help our team, especially early, like when you first hire and they're first new, to help them really embrace, like, hey, this is what we're seeing about your profile and who you are, and this is why we've hired you for this position. And yes, there are different opportunities for you to advance and grow within the organization, and we will keep exploring those. But it just helps shape the conversation differently when it's very clear that a particular person is probably not well suited for managing other people, and that that's okay. But that also doesn't have to mean that they get overlooked or that there's not other opportunities for them to advance or to grow their career. But it doesn't have to look as traditional, I think, as it used to. And so it's helped us to be more creative, even with like the types of career path that we want to lay out for people, and to really honor those that are really great right where they are and are successful at it, and that there's other ways to reward and incentivize those people than to necessarily promote them out of what they're well suited to do.
How do we just help them do more? Those individual contributor growth paths can be so validating. And especially we see our younger population, they don't aspire to be managers the way their parents did. And being aware of that isn't necessarily a desire. Now, part of the reason is as leaders, we have put too much on managers, or we've put too much like player coach responsibilities where I want you to do all your work. And oh, by the way, you're supposed to manage these other people, but when am I supposed to do that? I don't know, you'll fit it in. And I'm only going to judge you on your individual contributor work anyway. So there's a little bit of a nature of work situation at play there, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, the ability to evaluate candidates. And even if we hire someone who isn't a 10 out of 10 match, knowing where we might run in to issues has been really valuable for clients, for my own team, to say, hey, here's your stretch zone that we're expecting. And when they know that going in, it's so much less invalidating. It's like, oh yeah, I knew this going in. I was going to have to step it up in my detail orientation or my sense of urgency. Those kind of things, I just think show respect, a basic level of respect for people. Have you seen that in your hiring process?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially since there's almost always a stretch in the first 6 months where it's like, hey, this is kind of a new role, or we're in the process of building this out, or we're transitioning and we need you to step into the gap. And eventually, we fully expect that this role will be highly structured, repeatable, predictable, steady. And that's why we hired you. But for the first 6 months, you might have to be a little more adaptable, a little more flexible, a little more multitasking and dealing with variety and feeling like you're drinking through a fire hose. And I just want to acknowledge that that's going to feel potentially stressful, anxiety provoking, maybe a little overwhelming, but that's temporary. And the whole reason we're hiring you is because you're driven to take chaos and move it to a place of consistency and structure and routine. And so this is going to work out great. You're going to love it eventually, I promise. But yes, a lot of times there's a significant stretch in the first 6 months of any new role, because we often, at least in our organization, try to hire for the ideal of where we see this position in 18 months to 2 years. And so when we kind of forecast that out and build our profile for like, this is the ideal candidate we want, we try to think about it through the lens of the long-term person.
Where is it headed?
Yeah, where is it going to succeed? Okay. And yet we also often have it the case that the position is like, but this is brand new and it like isn't fully developed yet. And so, you know, that's a risk. You can hire someone who's maybe better at like growing and developing and creating, but then they don't love sustaining, optimizing, improving. And so, you know, but that's part of what you have to do, I think, if you use PI successfully, is to be honest with yourself about, you can't have all the things. So what is the most important thing for this role? And what are you willing to sacrifice to get these things? And how can you constantly remind yourself when maybe the deficits of the other half of the role that you thought ideally you wanted are not fully presenting themselves, you have to remember, like, yeah, I know that's, we have to shore that up with other people for now, or, round out those needs with other people on the team so that this person can succeed into what we're trying to grow it into.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take us down that path a little bit because I've seen something very similar. So I'm thinking what I'm hearing you say is some aspects of the role are non-negotiable. And some there might be different approaches that are effective. So like I'm thinking about a quality control role I scoped out with a client the other day. And in the PI language, D factor is all about precision. If you don't have precision hardwired in your DNA, and you're not just absolutely anal by nature, can you ever really succeed in a quality control role where we're really looking at, hundredth of an inch or these minute differences in products that we're putting out sometimes can cost us huge amounts of money as a client, as a company. But if I don't have that in my nature, I don't care if you've had 20 years of quality control experience. If you don't have this eye for detail, can you be successful in this role?
I don't think
And
so.
the client said, no. They said, but we have this one guy who's been in quality control for 25 years, just like you said, but he doesn't match up very well with our ideal candidate. I said, well, what about his D factor? And they said, yeah, it's not there. And I said, please don't hire him. He will cost you money. And they were like, oh, yeah, we probably would have hired him.
I know it is really hard. I do feel like, when you're building a culture and when you're hiring, you're drawn to certain types of personalities, I think, and certain, persuasions. And, PI can help create some objectivity there where you only look at candidates that fit the role. And even when you then interview them and you might feel a little annoyed at certain pieces, you're like, yeah, but we need that. Or we can't, I know we really like this person, but they just don't have, we're gonna struggle with this. We already know, like, it's gonna show up if we indulge this. And so yeah, really knowing which elements are the most important. And that's been something we've really played with, because sometimes you can get stuck with all of your factors being too close to the middle. And you're like, well, we kind of need them to be collaborative and work well on a team, but take initiative and also run the show. And
So we need them to be all things to all people. Got it? Good.
and then, not that there aren't individuals who are close to the midline and can be really adaptable and stretch, but at least in our organization, we have had better success finding people who have at least one or two pretty strong drives across one of the spectrums. And that's more fun. Those people are more fun for us. We kind of like folks that are pointy and different and unique and feel really strongly about the kind of work they love and what they enjoy doing. And so, yeah, that's been fun to play with in terms of, how intensely do you put the different drives as you're looking for candidates.
Yeah, I will tell a square peg round hole story on myself. Before I started using PI, I hired an admin who was the kindest woman. And she was lovely to interact with. She very much wanted to take care of me and make my life easier. And she'd been an executive assistant for probably 15 years, knew the role, and we just kept struggling. I kept needing her to take more initiative. Kept needing her to do things faster. And when I took on my partnership with Predictive Index to help other companies integrate this into their business, when I assessed my ideal candidate and compared her to it, I went, oh no, I understand all of this now, because she wasn't at all aligned with the natural aptitudes of the role. So while I loved her from a culture fit, everything I was asking of her was the opposite of the way her brain was programmed.
Yes.
So instead of asking her to run on the super highways in her brain, I was asking her, drive on the gravel roads, and it was slow and clunky and uncomfortable for both of us. And when I terminated her, it was like this, I'm so sorry. And her response was, I'm so sorry. I know I was letting you down. And it was heartbreaking because I just liked her. She was a great culture fit. And so what you were saying about let's not interview the people who aren't likely to succeed, then we can pick the ones we like. Because do we like them? Do we interact well with them? Should be a part of it, but it shouldn't be the only part, nor should the aptitude assessment through PI. So it's like we've got this three-legged stool between resume and experience. aptitude for the role through PI, behavioral and cognitive, and then the culture fit. Do we friggin' like them?
Yes, yes. And you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that because we have had a couple instances in the last role that we hired, which was more of an administrative role. And I feel like our team, because we drink the full PI Kool-Aid, are like already attached to certain people based on their resume and PI. We're like, this is the winner right here. Like, we're so excited. And then we meet them and we're like, oh, I don't know. And yet then we're like, I know, but the PI, maybe we should give them a chance. And so it's almost like we've gone the reverse, where instead of relying on the personal interaction, we've placed so much value in the PI that people are jockeying for certain positions based on how well they fit the role we've defined. And so there has been some fun going around in trying to create that right balance of like, well, they might be the right behavioral aptitude fit, but they just, we're not connecting. We don't like this person. And so, yeah, but our team's pretty hardcore about not compromising. We did do that once. So one time we were hiring for a like production manager. And so we created the role with key members of the team to, set the profile. And then we interviewed candidates, and one of the candidates we interviewed, we knew was kind of a stretch. Like, they weren't a great PI fit, but they came recommended and they had a good resume. So we felt like, well, we need to entertain, and interviewed, and the whole team really loved this person. And we felt like, let's take a risk. I know they don't totally fit on this side of it, but we like them. The experience is good. Let's go for it. And it didn't work out because ultimately, the areas that they were not well aligned on PI became very apparent, very obvious, very quickly. And we all had to kind of take a hard look and say, man, we did this person a disservice. And we did ourselves a disservice by wasting their time and our time, hoping that because we really liked them and because they had good experience, that they could just figure it out. In some ways they could figure it out, but there was too many gaps that felt like, yeah, but this is too hard for you this early, if that makes sense. And that was a bummer to have learned that, but it just helped reinforce for us, like, no, we don't, let's just not even interview folks that don't have a good fit. Like, don't be desperate. Don't compromise. It's better to stick with the profile you've built.
To trust yourselves. I think that's one thing that I really respect about the process behind PI is that when you get the stakeholders who know the demands of the role, you get their input individually, then you cross-reference them. And so often, I would say 3/4 of the time, they're beautifully aligned. And that is like, okay, great. So we know what we're looking for. We should trust that. But then when they're not, it's like, well, we've got some discussion to have internally before we put someone into a role where we're going to be stretching them 2 different directions based on what 2 different people need from them. Let's get aligned there. Then it says, okay, well, based on all this input, it's this beautiful write-up about here's your ideal person. Is that right? And when you fact check that a couple times against the stakeholders that are defining the role, and like, yeah, if we could get that person, man, we'd hire 10 of them. Okay, great. Now we're on the right page. Then we start evaluating candidates rather than, I think some tools out there have like a template. Here's an executive assistant. Here's customer service. Here's whatever. Sales, outbound sales. What you need it today for where your company's at, for where you want to go in the next, you were talking about 18 months. That's the power behind gathering today's input from the right stakeholders, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that is, you just hit the nail on the head. Like, PI allows for total customization of a role. And so even though there are some standard things you might think you want in an admin assistant or whatever else, like, I don't know, maybe not. It really depends on your organization, on who else you have on the team, on where you're trying to go, on how you work and how much they need to be able to be compatible with you. Like, there's just so many elements that the more you get to know yourself and your team and where you're headed, the more valuable PI becomes, which is just really cool.
It's like, it's almost like the more clear the edges of that square hole or round hole become, because you're getting clear on what do I need from this person, from this role. Uh, I have a client who places administrative assistants, and they took on Predictive Index because they have so many different types of clients that they need to place assistants for. They have like a pastor, they have a stay-at-home mom who's just trying to get other, she's in 5 volunteer responsibilities and she needs to offload some of it, and everything in between, CEOs and CFOs and small
Everything.
business owners. And so they're like, our standard EA profile, there isn't one. It's really, what does that client need from this role? And we craft it based on that. So it's pretty powerful the way it can.
Yeah. And, like even in thinking about management, like I, talked about my number two, and he does a lot of the management of the staff. And one, PI has really enabled him to grow in his leadership because he's super aware of like, oh, well, these folks need to be inspired, motivated, held accountable in this way. Like this is the language they speak. And these folks over here are really different. Like I can't just have my management style and hope that everyone will adapt to that. And he has much better relationships and better results because he's willing to tailor his interaction and the way that he interacts with the staff. But the other thing that's been so cool is it's also empowered him to step up and be like, you know what? I don't manage these profiles very well. And
Ooh.
even though I can see the value that they might bring to this kind of a role futuristically or whatever, like I'm just not there. Like I don't enjoy it and they don't enjoy me. And I need permission to have a narrower band of the types of personalities that I can successfully work with. And that was a hard conversation because I think we at first were much more about like, no, right fit for the role. And it's like, true, yes. But to then be able to say, yeah, but maybe as the current manager, and because we're a small team, it's probably not realistic that you're going to like be super successful with every profile that's out there. And it's okay that a couple of them are too tough for you right now. And so we can choose to say, well, then let's relook at the role and what this requires and what we're willing to flex on. Or maybe they need to bring in their dominance a little bit in order to fit. So that's been cool too, to be like, I'm not great with some of these profiles. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah, that awareness, there's so much, right? It starts with our ability to peel back that self-awareness onion and understand, well, who am I and how do I tick? How do I affect the people around me? I think that was something you were talking about in the pre-call was, I want to bring these people on and have them fit the role, but I also kind of want them to be me. At the end of the day, I kind of want them to do things the way I would do them because that's my lens on the world.
Yes, and I've even wondered how much of this is a difference between someone who has very high dominance or A factor, which I do, versus a much more collaborative leader. Because I'm so independent in the way that I think, I really felt like, oh, well, everyone should have that. Like everybody wants that, right? Like everybody wants control over their own universe. Everybody wants to be in charge of their own space. Everyone wants to lead and take initiative over their own work. Like that's what's fulfilling and enjoyable about work, right? And everybody wants to move fast, right? Everybody wants to like pick up the pace and like keep things moving and keep it fun and keep things spinning. And everybody's wants to be flexible, I'm sure. Like nobody wants to deal with the details. Like nobody likes that. That's not fun. And so I assumed that was the basic template for all people.
A human.
That's just how I am. And then I recognize like, oh, but we do need people that are more steady, more precise, more collaborative. And so I would try to find people like that. And this is all before PI. But then when I would find people who I could tell, like, oh yeah, you're really conscientious and you're really detail oriented and you're going to do a great job in these areas that I struggle with, you're going to really help shore up some things in our organization that we've needed shoring up. Then I would just be chronically disappointed that they weren't also doing all of the things that I do. And
Your
so
way.
yes. And so PI really helped me to like, it's a great visual, right? It's like, oh, if you're over here, you actually can't physically also be over here. Like you can't span both sides of the spectrum. And so that really led to one, me valuing people who were opposite me in such a more meaningful way. Like I had so much more empathy for what I was asking of them and expecting of them, and really truly seeing like if they're going to occupy that space well, I have got to remove the pressure and the expectation that they also occupy the other space. That's not real, that's not fair, that's not realistic. And so that really changed a lot of things for us internally once we once I realized, oh, you can't all do all the things. Oh, okay, I guess we'll get multiple people who can do some things really well, and then together we'll have a well-rounded team. Which
Divide and conquer. Yeah.
yes,
Tell me, Jen, for you and anybody on your team who manages others, do you get the sense that this is like you take in the information and it's kind of a one and done? You're like, okay, got it, moving on. Do you come back to it at some frequency? Do you go back over their PI results with the people on your team and use it as a reminder and guideposts? As you
yeah,
interact with the data, is it a one and done or is it an ongoing living discussion?
definitely ongoing. So it's for sure the case that any candidate that we move forward and hire within their first week, we have a pretty comprehensive PI debrief, and I share with them, like, here's how we arrived at the targets for your role. Here's your results. Here's how you line up with this role. And here's what this means in terms of where you might struggle a little bit or where this might be a little bit of a stretch. And here's where you're perfectly aligned because these are the expectations and the things that we're wanting. So we do a pretty extensive session with all new hires around that. And then I make the team retake it every 6 months to assess their, the second half of the quiz, which talks about,
Self-concept.
right, like how do you feel like you're doing based on the expectations of the role so that we can see if we're well aligned or does an adjustment need to be made? Is there too much of a stretch going on? Or even if we can't make an adjustment, can there be an acknowledgement? Can there be a conversation that says, hey, I get it. Like this is still pushing you beyond what would feel most comfortable for you. And I appreciate that. And here's where we're at as a company. And here's what I'm hoping to change in the next 6 months, year, whatever. How are you feeling? Can you hang in there? Because sometimes if you are a really high capacity person, you can stretch for a period of time in a way that feels, not exactly comfortable, but it's something you could do, especially if you believe in the team and the vision and the mission. But I think you miss an opportunity if you don't acknowledge it. If you don't say, like, this is harder for you. This is a stretch. This is not like really filling your tank to do it this way. And I appreciate that you're making that investment. So we try to do that every 6 months or at least a year. And then anytime we consider a promotion or an advancement or a lateral move into a different department, then absolutely that leads the discussion first. And so if someone preemptively wants to be considered for something else in the organization, then same thing. I'll meet with them and say, okay, well, here's what the role requires. And I'll put up the role profile and then I'll overlay theirs and say, so let's talk about it. Like, do you actually think this is what you want to do and where you want to go? Or can you see how some of this could be really challenging or a stretch, et cetera? And so that's been very, very helpful to let that guide the direction around people shifting and changing, which happens a lot because I'm a small company. And I actually really believe in building my organization around the gifts of my people and developing what we offer and what we do around what each team member brings to the table. But and inherent in that, there is a lot of movement. There is a lot of switching and wearing multiple hats. There is a lot of pitching in and being a part of the team and helping out where you can. And so it's always this contraction and expansion of, here's where we're growing. And so therefore there's some shifting and there's some transition and there's some additional responsibilities and we need everybody to pitch in. And then like, okay, let's move to a more narrower, more defined, more clear expectation around the role. But that's an ever evolving thing. And so really trying to keep PI at the forefront of those conversations and decisions and assess where our people are and where they're going to be the most fulfilled, it's really important because because we're a small team, I need maximal output from every single person. And the only way I get that is if every person feels maximally fulfilled and maximally suited, right? And I can't achieve that all the time, but the more I move towards it, the more maximal output I get. The more I can craft and tailor their role, the growth of our organization to ideally fit what our people most want to do and how they most want to work, we all win. Like we get exponentially more as a company. And I don't know why you wouldn't think of it that way. I think there's a lot of old school thought that's like, well, this is what the company needs, and you're either can't adapt everything to fit the individual. And I think there's some truth to that, but I think especially with smaller companies where there's not a lot of bureaucracy and there's a lot of nimbleness and flexibility, there is real opportunity to tweak and customize and tailor roles specific to the people you have. And that's so fun. It's so fun.
This is like my whole world, my talent optimization little bubble where we get the right, like just understanding what makes everybody unique and what they find joy in doing, and then doing a little horse trading, like, well, I hate giving presentations. Well, I hate making them. Well, can you make my presentations and I'll give yours? Well, oh my God, that'd be great. And just little overlaps there can alleviate a lot of frustration, energy drain, because it's all an energy equation in life, individually and as a team. So I think
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons I like PI, is it just like lay it out for me. Tell me what to do. Tell me what to watch out for. Tell me where someone might get tripped up, or maybe they're just at risk of burnout and I need to see them, either give them a different permission slip to do things their way, or maybe put them in a different pot where they might thrive with different sunlight. And um,
Yeah. I feel like a lot of my CEO colleagues have a feeling that when they see someone struggling with something, they feel like, well, they need to figure this out. Like, this is how they need to mature. This is how they need to grow in their professionalism. Not everybody can have an assistant, or not everybody can, get an accommodation. Like, everybody needs to be able to figure out how to do their job and do it well. And I think underpinning that is not necessarily a bad motive, but PI gives you a different lens on what you would have otherwise seen as a deficit, or as laziness, or as not very conscientious, or not taking initiative, whatever. All these things that you would normally be like, this is a problem in this person. This is an area they need to overcome, and that they need to improve on, and that they need to step up in. And I feel like, quite frankly, that's rarely the case if you have a good person in your organization. It's rarely the case that consistent patterns that you're noticing are a deficit of the person. And it's really just a misalignment of expectation and roles. And it's like, why fight that? Why constantly keep pushing into a space of disappointment and frustration when it's not necessary? Like, and again, this assumes that you have high quality people with good character and work ethic and all of that. But if you do, and you're seeing a struggle, it's, don't immediately assume it's a deficit. I found it rarely to be the case.
yeah, sometimes I like the language in PI because it helps us flip the script about what do they do well? How can we set them up for success? I mean, there's literally a how to manage this person guide that's like the cliff notes on do this, try this, say this. And I think so many managers that I run into are so strapped for time, and they're like, I want to do well for this person. I want to support and encourage them in a way that connects for them. But I'm not sure, based on who I am, that I know how to do that. It's like, okay, well, try this. Here's your one pager.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can be pretty beneficial. So, what else? Tell me about a little bit about when your team integrating PI. What feedback have you heard from them? I know you're a fan. And I know your number two seems to be a fan. Tell me about the rest of the team. How does it resonate when they're being onboarded? Do you share your PI with them so they have a feel for how you're running the company? What does that look like?
I do share my PI and I try to poke as much fun at myself as I can and really try to highlight like, here's where it's going to be hard to work for me. Here's where it's going to be a struggle just in general, because I'm pretty far in all except for my extroversion, the other three categories, I'm pretty far from the midline. And so I really try to highlight that as much as possible so that they have an insight into how I work and how I see the universe, and that can help them. And I haven't had any employee not feel really seen by the PI or feel like how does this 5-minute quiz know this much about me? I think that's often a reaction I get, like, what? Like, how is it that accurate? Like,
Yeah.
also had so many employees be like, that's why that last job was so hard, or that's why I couldn't figure out how to make it work at a previous situation. And so that's been very validating for them to be like,
Mm,
oh, this is why this was such a struggle for me. Or this is why I didn't like this, or why I didn't do well in school, maybe even, or, had challenges in that arena. And so it's been almost this very cool validation of who they are as a person and having them feel seen and valued in a way that I don't know, a lot of other tests haven't really been able to do. And so that's been very, very cool. And it's generally very well received. I have had some people feel frustrated with the fact that they are a certain way and wish that they could push in the other direction. So that's been interesting. I've only had one instance of an employee who felt like they didn't agree with one measurement of the four. And so it was an interesting conversation to explore because this was a very high capacity person. And so I think their PI said that they were more flexible, but they were used to doing work that required quite a bit of precision. And they saw themselves as a very operationally minded person, a very procedurally minded person, and that they cared a lot about that. And so they didn't really relate to the fact that they were showing up as super flexible. And so we really explored that together for a while, and to help them understand and see that this isn't a measurement of capacity. Like, you could be highly capable of doing these very precise things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's your natural state or that that's your
yeah.
drive of how you would like to approach work. And I think they just kind of sat with it in that initial conversation, and I could tell they were like, I'm not sure, I fully buy it. But they came back like a week later and said, you know what? I think the reason that I had such a hard time is because I've spent so much of my career pushing myself to be this kind of employee. And I have achieved success. I have been successful at it. But I don't think I ever stopped to ask, is this actually what I really love doing? Or did I just get started in this and I'm a smart person? And so I figured it out and I built a lot of experience around it and I happen to be pretty good at it. But I had never given myself permission to think about what it might be like to not do this kind of work. And so it was
Yeah.
super cool. It was super,
Interesting.
super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. I think about that in terms of the B factor around extroversion. When you have really low B people, it's not that they don't develop relationships. It's that they don't need 400 relationships in any given day. They need fewer, deeper relationships. And so they'll often say, I'm great with people. I'm like, yeah, but you're people, right? Not all the people. And then they kind of go, okay, you're right.
Yes.
Versus my brother who wants to make friends with every person he makes eye contact with. And it's exhausting to me.
I love to use the Lego analogy. It's like some people are the big green grass sheet Lego, and they've got room for everybody on there. And then, like, I am the too big Lego. Like, I can build depth with a few people, but I only have room on my sheet for a couple. And
Oh, I
I
like that
that would
analogy.
explain, yeah, because people who are extroverted get it. They're like, yes, the more the merrier. Like, I want to build this whole network of people. And then the small, like, no, like I have 4 pigs. That's it. I've got room for 3 people, and we go really high deep, but that's it. I cannot have anybody else on my board. Yeah.
Funny. Let's see, what else do we need to explore in this space? We've talked about the individual, we've kind of talked about managing others. Have we talked about well-roundedness of the team? Because it's in our nature usually to want to hire lots of people like us because we're great. And so if we hire people like us, they'll be great. But then sometimes we stack too deep in people like us. That one of the analogies I use is like stars have sharp points and they should, and teams can be well-rounded because we overlay each other's weaknesses as we start to accept, acknowledge, and embrace those things and know that we need other people to round us out. How does that work from what you've seen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily for me, we've done the opposite, but it has led to a lot of self-reflection on, man, is this just me and my organization, or is this more indicative of a larger case study or trend? But I think because my A factor is so high that I need a lot of counterbalance
Mm.
to make sure that where I'm trying to go is realistic and possible. And so I need like 5 process precision people to counter my agility innovation space.
Yeah.
And I often wonder if that's because it's the opposite of collaborative, right? I'm like, I'm just out here like living my dream and going my whatever. And it requires a lot of people who otherwise are not super aggressive about saying, hey, excuse me, I'm not sure about this idea. I don't know why we would do that, or this feels like not sustainable or not scalable, right? Like those people generally, if they're more collaborative, I found, don't jump in and splash into the pool and say, here's everything wrong with this idea. They tend to be a little more, they might talk about it with each other, but
They
in
don't
the
want to
group
rock the boat
setting,
with you though.
and so they need safety in numbers, I have found, to be able to then say as a group, like I get the idea and I think this is really cool, but just as a reminder, we've got these other 5 things that are in development, and like maybe we could look at that in 6 months. And so I do think that if you're an owner who happens to have a really high A drive and potentially a high, C factor, well, I don't know which way to go, but you're impatient and you want to move fast.
Low C factor, yeah.
If
Which
you
is
have that,
almost every CEO
a
on
lot
the
of us.
planet.
Yeah. So if you've got that combination, in my experience, you are better off hiring as many people that do not have that combination as possible. And you've got enough for the company to push that forward and to take that on. And it can feel a little lonely and it can feel a little isolating. And that's part of what you sign up for, I think, in order to have it be your show and be your ideas and your vision and where you want to go. But if you really want to build something sustainable and scalable, like frankly, sustainability and scalability are not a big part of your profile. Like that's, you like risk, you like new, you like fast, you like innovation. And so, but you have to really ask yourself, yeah, but is that what I want to build? Like, is this just a playground for me to like try things, and or do I actually want to build something successful? So scalability and sustainability is important. You need a lot of collaborative, sustainable, steady, precise people, because they know how to do scale and they know how to do sustainable.
And they don't
And
get bored with it like we do,
no,
unfortunately,
they
or
really
fortunately
don't.
for us.
Yeah, they really don't. They're so happy to keep doing it. So yeah, in my experience, I'm pretty cautious, even though I enjoy people and my friends are people that are more like me. We just, at our size, we don't have a lot of room for more of my type yet. I think eventually you will, and we'll want that. But for now, I need more people who can counter and rein me
Or
in.
people you can pass the baton to and they can run with it. And yeah,
Yes.
interesting. You touched on something that I think is really interesting, especially for people who are in professional services. and using Predictive Index. And it's something I have told Predictive Index I do and I will continue to do. It's not really purpose built, but it's amazingly effective. So when I have a new client, whether or not we're using PI together, I have them take the assessment because I want to know how to best serve them. And I think that's something you've taken on as well, right? When you onboard a new client, you look at the way that they see the world through PI so you can serve them best. Tell me a little bit about how that has worked and helped you develop an effective working relationship with clients.
Yes. So I have all of my CEO clients take it, and it's something that precedes our very first meeting together. And I do a 2 hour like visioning exercise with each of my owners, and we talk about their PI profile first. And I'll often also show them mine and say, hey, this is why we connect. This is why this feels like a good fit.
I see you.
Yeah. And here's where we might struggle. You know, we both want to be in charge and we're both pretty assertive about that. And that's awesome. But it could, could get in the way if we're not careful about our lanes. And so I find it to be incredibly helpful, both for how I manage my clients and know what they need. And so if I have a very collaborative CEO, and I have several that are that way, I know that they are largely engaging because they want my independent drive. They are looking for someone to say, what do you think I should do next? They are way more capable of making that happen. They don't really need very much from me on how to make that happen, but they do need confidence to say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. But they don't have that strong independent nature that says like, yeah, whatever, this is my idea, I'm gonna run with it.
Yeah.
I have that in spades, and so I can extend that to my clients. Or I have some CEOs that are very steady, and so growth is hard for them because it's unpredictable and it's challenging and it moves things, and they like system and they like structure and they like predictability and they like routine. And so I'm very driving. And so I can come in and be an agent of change because they know they need it. And so I can really push into that space. So I try to take all of our deliverables and all of our consulting lenses and try to craft something that uniquely suits that owner in a way that can really help them become the most effective CEO for their organization. And so that's been super fun. And almost all of my CEOs really buy into it and get it and love it, and have sought PI for themselves as a result in their organization. And so it's very helpful. Yeah.
Good. Good. Well, I want to be cognizant of time. I know you have a meeting right after this podcast. So I'm going to pull together what I think are some of the tips and tricks I've really heard from you in terms of your utilization of the tool. Please correct me or add to or modify as needed. I heard two things about the hiring process. One is to identify the non-negotiable factors and lean on those as much as possible and not compromise. Two is to not use the PI elements, behavioral and cognitive, as the only evaluation factors. That balance is key, that we've got a balance between resume experience, likability and culture fit, and the aptitudes that we know are demanded in the role. And the third thing I heard was around meet them where they are. Really, when we talked through it, it related to employees and our clients in terms of understanding who they are, how they intake information, what they need from us as support, whether we're supporting them because they pay us or we're supporting them because we pay them. It's really kind of the same on both sides of the coin. And then I really liked what you talked about, Jen, in terms of ever evolving roles, responsibilities, growth trajectories, and continually coming back to this pivot point of who is this human and how might they be successful? So anything else you think I missed as you think about the utility of PI for you and your clients?
I think that's a great summary. I think the only nuance I would add to the hiring is I think it's useful to choose at least one category that you're moving fairly far off the midline from. Be mindful of not having a super narrow where everybody just fits the middle of the role. Like embrace the fact that someone needs to have something a little divergent. The other thing Really, for me, PI is two sides of a coin. One side is this is a powerful tool for people to feel seen and valued. And when you then have people who are seen and valued, and you try your best as an organization to then create a role or put them in a role where who they are and what they do is suited, it's a powerful combination. And so PI enables both sides of that. And so I think we're constantly trying to invest in both sides, use it for people to feel really seen and really valued for who they are, which does require that you invest in them and you talk to them about their profile and you revisit it and you take it over again and you look at engagement. So that whole side of it. And then as a leader, you think about your company and what you're building and the roles you're creating and the expectations around it. And you choose to make that as tailored as possible to the people that you're trying to bring on. And I think if you do that, man, it's just a lot of fun. What becomes otherwise a people problem is turned into a people opportunity. And I think most CEOs really love that. Like they want to build a team that they're excited to invest in, and they like seeing their people grow and improve and find purpose in their work. Like that's a big part of why we do it. And so this just really enables that so beautifully.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jen. I love this topic. I love having your team as a client and working with you side by side to build both our organizations and keep finding new ways to use PI and get value out of the tool. So if you'd like to learn more about Solomon Advising, what's the best way to contact you?
You can email me directly at jennifer@solomonadvising.com. And I would be happy to talk to anybody that's listening to the podcast about our success with PI, our success with working with your organization at Activate, or what we do to support organizations in marketing and operations.
Awesome. Well, if you'd like to learn more about integrating PI into your organization, about employee engagement or talent optimization as a bigger point of view, I'd love to chat with you. You can find me on LinkedIn is probably the easiest. Melissa Ortiz, YERXA is my middle name, my maiden name. And I hope you'll join us for a future episode of You Got People Problems. Thanks, y'all. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of You've Got People Problems. If you got something out of the conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with the other leaders in your network, because let's face it, we all have people problems. You can watch full episodes on YouTube or listen on your favorite podcast app. But either way, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.